Hello and good morning. Happy to be here in Warsaw and glad you're all joining this session. This early morning we'll be talking about the three pillars of observability, logging, tracing and metrics, and how you can add that as instrumentation in .NET applications, and if you're using Azure, how to make it all observable from Azure. Now, the reason we want to do that is because if you want to do DevOps, it's not just about building your application, it's also about running it and operating it, but you need to know what your application is doing. So hence the observability. You need to monitor your system. Microsoft has this checklist where they say, okay, you should make your systems observable, and it's all about getting the information from your system. And I like to call it, being observable, but your application is instrumented with a couple of things. And we'll look into that today with a couple of demos, and let's see where we go. But I do want to get us to get on a basic understanding of what it is all about. So let's say you're a DevOps engineer and you're practicing DevOps, like the shirt says. You build it, you run it, you own it, you feel responsible for it. You pick up a work item, you start developing, you have this fast inner loop on your development laptop to get the application going. Now, and we've all been here, you push it out as a work that's being completed into a repository, and then your pipelines will pick up from there. It does the testing and it will do all the things, the checking, and this is where usually things start to go a bit hazy, because as soon as you start hosting this on your laptop, it was all fine and you could do debugging, but then you go to production and then all of a sudden you have no more information because it's like, okay, it's doing something wrong. And what I see a lot is that people tend to go to logging, just put lots of logs in there, so at least we can look at the logs in production. But what if we could make this much more observable, so we can really look into this and close the loop from the outside, so the bigger loop. But that's where you need to get the instrumentation data, and somehow your applications should feed that or provide that, and then you can monitor it with some tooling. And that's where you close your outer loop. And the monitoring might be about your application performance. It might be on your resources that you're using from your cloud provider, or it might be about functionality. But maybe you want to know, are they using the new feature as well? So that's also a part of getting information from your application. And then you can, create new work items if needed, but at least you're a healthy, happy DevOps engineer because you can do all the things and there's no stressing when you're running in production. And this is getting more and more tricky if you're doing cloud applications, because they tend to be more distributed in nature. They are split up in multiple parts. So maybe you have a microservices architecture with all these elements that are interacting with each other, and it's just no longer a monolith, and there's nothing wrong with monoliths, but that was kind of easy because it was a single process running, but now it's across network call, so more is happening. And how do you get all that information together to see the flow of the things happening? Well, that's where you need the pillars of observability, logs, traces, and metrics. But there's other stuff that you can talk about. But usually there are variations of those three things. And with that information, you'll probably need some tooling to get you going. And so you don't have to create all of the tools yourself, but you just pick something that you like. And today I'll be showing mostly Azure and Azure Monitor with log analytics workspaces, application insights, but you can pick any of these and they all provide the same things. If you're working on Azure, and there will be similar things on AWS and Google Cloud, it's all about what can I get from my application? Well, there is decentralized place. For Azure, it's Azure Monitor, and it has two parts, the logs and the metrics. That's where stuff goes. The traces, that's the third thing, they will be more, a bit in between. If you're running things on Azure, you have your Azure tenant, that's where your accounts live, and it has its own logs. You have your Azure subscription that has activity logs on all the things going on by people making changes to the resources and to the subscription itself. And then you have the individual resources, which can be anything from a virtual machine to a Kubernetes cluster and things in between for storage or compute. And they send out their own diagnostics. So this is what you all get for free. Just hook it up to a log analytics workspace that's You can think of just a single workspace or maybe split up a little bit, but at least get everything collected in a place where you can see it. And then this is the part where we're, I think, focusing on today. That's your cloud application, whatever that may be. You'll build it probably using .NET, and you will have a lot of NuGet packages to do stuff and add this observability things. And that's what we'll be looking at. And that's where you get your logs, traces, and metrics, but you also need to get that to the single place where you can combine everything from resource usage to your application's performance. They call it performance, but it's more than just how fast it is. It's how well is it doing and what is it doing. There's a control plane. That's the more of the things like where you control the stuff. On your application, it's more about the data that is flowing there and what is happening. So that's kind of a distinction where there's a pivot to data-oriented things inside your application versus the things happening to your resources. This is our focus. Now, for application instrumentation, logging, tracing, metrics. Those are the three important ones. I added an extra one, the 3+1, the health, because it has a place of its own. You have NuGet packages that will help you get this in your application and get it instrumented. Microsoft has its own. There's alternatives from open source contributions, and there's even software vendors and integrators that have their version of things. Now, getting this out, you use the NuGet packages to use the types there and send out this information. All you need to do is collect this, send it to the place that you use for monitoring, and then you're kind of good to go. Your monitoring can receive that information as being pushed, but in case of health information, it's not uncommon that the monitoring will query or request the information about the application's health. Now, and there's all these variations, so there will be little subtle arrows here. You can send out health information as metrics, so it just flows with metrics, which you could push to Prometheus and then view it with Grafana. Well, today for us it's Azure Monitor. And the other thing that you can do is have trace information be logged and log information be traced. But that's kind of a gray area. When you have it in your monitoring system, you can do all these things like analyze it, get some dashboards with green and red dials to show you just how you are doing, and you can do some profiling and see, okay, let's troubleshoot and see what is going on, how fast is it going. And I think this slide here is an important one because. Especially the distinction between logs and traces is very important. Because if maybe you've ever run into the situation where okay, we've got huge logs, gigabytes of log data in production. Why is there so much? We're running out of space, it's costing so much. That's usually because there's log information everywhere, but it's not about logging. It's only there to help you find out what happened and how it happened. How did we get here? And it's like troubleshooting, poor man's debugging, you might say. But that's what tracing is for. And tracing is very different from logging. So make a very conscious decision, is this something that I want to have a year down the line, that we want it logged, something that is stored, or is it just in case of need, we want to see what is happening, and that's tracing. Now the metrics is about numeric data, how much, how fast, those kind of things. It's about numbers, which you can total up, sum, min, max, and analyze in that way. Health is the application providing information on how it's doing, because you some internal information that is not visible from the outside. And then you have the auditing, and that's more of a security concern, who did what. All right. So I'm kind of assuming that most of you have already done a lot of logging, so I'll skip a lot of things here. The slides will be available, and then there will be more information in there. But the things that I want to highlight if you start using logging is that the log categories are structured much like namespaces. So there's a hierarchy in there that you can use to your advantage. And the hierarchy comes from the way you define your classes. So if you use an iLogger of T, it will use the name of the class and the namespace as the category name for what you're doing. So that's where you see how things kind of roll up into each other. That's one thing, and the other thing is a log level, and you need to pick that carefully as well. And if you do, for example, a try catch, and then what is it you log? What log level will you pick in your catch if you do the logging? And sometimes you see log error, but error means there's something really wrong. You know, there's only one that's worse, that's critical. Then it's like, okay, it's game over. This is the last thing we could say. This is critical, and now we're gone. But error means like something's really, really wrong, and that's when you get called in the middle of the night if that happens too fast. But if you're doing try catch, it's like a controlled situation. So maybe it's just a warning, maybe it's only informational because this is anticipated. It might go wrong, but we can do something with it. So this is where you need to pick your log levels carefully. And once you have that all in place, then you can do filtering both on the severity and on the category. So you can just freely log things, and you shouldn't be concerned where it's going, because there might be multiple log providers and each of them can have different filters based on this, you know, how bad is it and which category does it come from. And you can configure those things in, well, anywhere inside of the application settings. Blue screen, oh, well, not mine at least. So you can do anywhere in the .NET configuration system, you can provide the settings for your logs. Usually it's app settings JSON. And then you have this section where it says, okay, this is for every provider. We say, okay, per category, this is the severity level that we're looking for. We want to see everything from this and up. And then the console one at the bottom, that's one that's specific to console. It might also be other log providers like Serilog or whatever you have. And then you can specify that one and overrule things that have been set at the global level. So this name is specific, but whatever is under there, it mimics the thing from log level. All right. So I'm not fluent in Polish by far, but I believe we are at a university here. I spent some time doing physics in the Netherlands. I studied there, and I had my fair share of quantum mechanics, quantum statistics. So I know about, well, I know what I really know about quantum state, but it's a weird thing, right? And who of you has heard about the Schrödinger cat? The cat that is alive or dead or is somewhere in between? All right. Very good. So that's weird, right? So it's both. Until you observe it, then it's either dead or alive. But before that time, it's half dead, half alive. Now I like the comparison with the thing for the log messages, because log messages can be human readable because we want to read them, but sometimes we just want them to be about the data, the information that is inside of the log message that is there. But if you log it just as a string, you need to do all this information. You need to get the information out by using regular expressions or whatever, and it becomes difficult. But what if you could have both? And that's what they call structured logging or semantic logging. And that's kind of neat that you can have both worlds. Until you observe it, it can be either. And you can change your mind. That's even more beautiful. So for example, if you would use that, it's very subtle. But in this little snippet here, it says, you know, we picked the level log information, and it says searching with, and then it has a placeholder that has a term there. That's the semantic part. This is what you need to think about. What are the terms that I'm using? So in this case, in the samples that I'll be giving, there's this thing called a search limit. And you see at the end that there's an argument that is limit, and it doesn't match up by name. It's positional. So the first placeholder goes to the first argument and so on. So you can have more than this. But this makes sure that we have a template that says, this is the text, this is the placeholder, and the information that goes here is separate. And you can query the information separate, but you can also see, you know, when we fill it in, you can see the string that says searching with, I don't know, 1,000 results. If you want to use that, not every log provider supports it, but the ones that I know of that do are Application Insights and SEC. SEC is very close to Serilog, but they are not the same. SEC is the underlying data store, Serilog is the logging framework. But if you use SEC, then you can store that information, and I'll be using that one, and later on probably show you the Application Insights version of it as well. All right, so let's get to this part. I have an application somewhere here. All right, let's stop it for a minute. This source code is also available, but just to show you, there's a web application that shows high scores, and the high scores come from this web API. The web API goes to a database, so we have some entity framework core here that with DB context and stuff, and then some seeding. But this is all fairly straightforward. What I put in there to show you some of these things is this leaderboard controller. And in this leaderboard controller, we do a couple of things, but we have this leaderboard factory that we inject. So we create a logger. This is where you can choose your own thing. You can even give it a totally other name. And then here in the get for getting the list, there's an automatic limit. If you don't specify it, we'll just set it to 10. This comes from the query string later on. But it shows here these three things: log error, log warning, log information. Kind of contrived, but it's a demo. But this is doing exactly what we saw with the limit and the search limit thing. Now if we run this, and I'll show you what we run, because it's quite a lot. Excuse me, let's get that back. So here we have a Docker file, a Docker Compose file that says, okay, we have 2 projects that we want to run and build, but what we need in the runtime situation is, well, some environment variables, and the important additional things are that we have a database as well. So we're running a database from a container. These other things, the web API and the web app are also running from containers with Docker Compose. And we have SEC running, so that's the data store for our semantic logging information. We have a health checks UI container that will query the health endpoints and provide a user interface. And yeah, that's the most important ones for now. But this SEC is exposed at 5341. So let's first go to see, okay, the web API, what can it do? If we go and try it out, it will execute. And we can see, okay, there's some data coming here, but all fine. It has a limit of 10. We can also say, let's do a limit of 3. Execute that one. All right, so we only get 3. Yeah, and then we do this. So we go to 5341, we get SEC, we get all this information. Now, and this is a lot of stuff, right? So there's health information coming in, there's log information coming in, there's stuff from Entity Framework Core. But let's just filter out this information on the search limits. Now, we had these 3 particular ones. But just imagine that you're logging from different places, but they all have this term search limits, not just the single place where we did it. But if you start with typing it, it recognizes, okay, I have this in this metadata stuff that you're logging about. So search limit, let's search limit bigger than 3, and then see what happens. And you can see that you have all these things. It looks like text, but it knows that this here has this search limit of 10. So it's also as the machine readable part. And you can do all these smart things, because if you want to pick out the ones that are you can really drill down to this and build beautiful queries combining more information than just the search limit. Make sense? And this is like a new level of logging, and it's so easy to do. Just you need to think about those terms, because if you start using search limit or limit search or whatever, then it becomes harder. So that's you might want to build something like a dictionary there. All right, next up, the tracing. Tracing is more about, okay, how can we see the flow of our application? It's different than logging because logging is persisted in most cases. You might want to log everything based on the filter. But with diagnostics traces, we're sort of sending it, we're publishing it, and if nobody's listening, it's also fine. It will just go away. But if you want to listen, you just attach a listener and you have all this information coming in. In the system diagnostic namespace, you'll see that there's trace and trace source, which have proven their points from .NET 1 and onwards. But the biggest thing is that it uses activities under the cover. So trace and trace source you can use, but there's more modern stuff. But this will definitely work, and it works well. And you can just say somewhere trace right line, and it works. You don't need to inject anything. So if you have complex object models, this is accessible from everywhere. You don't need to do an iLogger and inject that into every object that you have. So pretty good. And there's a bunch of listeners out there. The list is fairly stable, and there are additional NuGet packages, so you can do other trace listeners as well. But this is the big one. This is the activities. Activities are, just there. They're contextual, so they flow through thread to thread. You don't have to worry about, if you're doing async await, am I still using the right one? Because this is taken care of by activities, and it's real magic. And you can control it as well. So there's things happening automatically, and libraries that Microsoft and others are using lift on this, and they start new activities as part of a parent activity. So you can see, this relates to that. So we have a bunch of work that we do, calculations maybe, and these are the individual sub-activities that we want to do. Or we do a call out to a different web API. All those things bundle up together in terms of activities, and the information that is in there that just flows. Two things that rely on that pretty heavily are application insights and OpenTelemetry. So both lift on these activities. I really recommend looking into this even just a little bit. And the snippet of code might be something where you say, okay, I'm doing something special here, so let me start a new activity and I'll give it a name so I can see, okay, this is where we're doing something with the search engine and it's doing its thing. All right, so I'll show a very short demo just to give you a little sense of the information that will be there. So if we go to the score controller, if we post a score, so do a new high score, then we'll say, okay, let's assume that this is a big thing. When somebody is playing a video game and we have this platform that just reports new high scores all over the world, we want to know about the fact that there's a new high score submission. It might not be the highest in the world, but at least we want to handle this and show this as an activity. So this is where you can create your own activities, give it some extra data, so it says the start time, but if you don't do anything special, it will be the date time now. And this is also, the gamer, that's some metadata as a tag. And the other thing, so at the top, and this is for later, we're injecting this telemetry client, and that's the sending out telemetry with application insights. And this telemetry client we can use to start some operation where we say, okay, this is just make pretend, right, for the demo, but let's just say that this thing is a dependency. So it's a separate thing. It might be on a network call or not. It might be in here, but we'll treat it as a dependency because it's this thing that we are doing now. And we'll give it the activity. And then we can, do things within that operation. It will show up later on. And how it will show up is that we can use this client track event. So we'll say, okay, we got a new high score because we passed the point where we see, okay, we have either a new high score or it's at least bigger than the previous one. And we're also doing some metrics here. So we're sending out metrics with the same telemetry client. Yes, so that's one way of doing it. I'm showing you this now so we can do it see it in the demo later on. And then we have the diagnostics metrics, that's for later, where we have a different way of logging. That's two versions of almost the same thing. All right, so the last thing that I showed you with this event source is the new and improved system diagnostics tracing namespace. And this is where you have two things, event source and event counters, that will help you to raise trace information, give metrics through this thing called an event pipe. And it's kind of like event tracing for window or LTTing, a high performance, low impact way of sending out trace information. So traces and metrics, but it's cross-platform. So it works on Windows and Linux alike. And this is new since .NET 6. So they have, you can use an event pipe to consume this information. There's tooling from Microsoft, .NET Trace, .NET Counters, .NET Monitor, and you have Web Insights that also works well with the event pipe. So we can lift on that as well. And if you want to get this information from in process, because maybe you're writing some tooling or whatever, then you can do an event listener, which is a special NuGet package that's kind of obscure and it's sort of hidden away. But if you look for this client thing, then you'll find an event listener where you can directly listen to event sources and in event counters. And those counters are similar to performance counters in Windows that you used to have. Again, it's cross-platform, so now this also works in Linux. And the .NET libraries have been instrumented with a lot of that, the event counters. So if you run your application, maybe you didn't know, but it's already sending out all these metrics. You can see a screenshot on the right that says these are all the things that are there. The values aren't listed, but these are all the categories and things that we're looking at. So the garbage collection, generation sizes, for example, but also how much memory are we using and what's the working set and CPU usage. And these things are observable again, so you can have a tool that just picks up on these things. Now the event counters themselves, there's on average there's two. There's things that just send out a value, and there's things that send out something that is ever increasing, but it's about the rates of things. So how fast is it going up, down, or an event counter is just simple as, okay, this is the value, and we can see like a graph what the value is in time. Event counter with incrementing event counter is more of how fast, so per second, for example. And you can use both, and you can just provide a value, or you can do the polling counter versions, which says, okay, this is the lambda expression, this is how you get the value. So you can do a small bit of evaluation there. All right. Now, we already did a couple of things, right? So we were sending out information. Let's go back to here. We had this thing with this search limit. Now there is this thing called a trace ID here. So I'll just pick this trace ID. This is one of the things that gets added to the activity. So we'll just have this unique thing in the activity, and this flows everywhere. Now if we go to our Azure portal, and we go to Application Insights, this is connected, so there are some small lines in the configuration of the application that says, okay, this is where we want to push this information. I can go to the transaction search, put that number in, and just say, okay, show me stuff that happened around this. And it will find everything that happened in that particular request. So this was just a web API call, but we can just drill down in here and then see, okay, so what happened there? So we had a request, we went to the database, but also things happened. So we can see here that we were, with this trace information that we send out there, that we were searching with the limit of 3. So that's also surfacing here. And you see that the search limit here is also available. So you can do queries on this, for example. And now let's see if I can get this just top of my head. Let me see where it is, logs. So you should be able to say, okay, we have traces here. And we want something like where custom dimensions dot search limit let's say equals 3. Did I mistype something there? Yep. All right, and just run this. And you can see that we also, just like in sec, you can do the same thing here with that logging. But the other thing that we saw with the transaction thing, so let's do something different. So this is the front end. They will call the back end. So it's, you see that it retrieved all the data and just displayed it there. Simple call. But there is an intentional bug here that if we say limit is 0, which doesn't make sense, but it might just be, okay, then I will get everything. You see that it takes a long, long time. So that's kind of weird, right? And it just, okay, it gracefully, it didn't complete the call to the back end, but at least it didn't crash, right? So there is some things involved with poly. It's retrying 3 times. But now we want to see, okay, so did things go really, really well or not so good at all? Now remember, we have the activity. The activity is flowing stuff everywhere, and it does also distributed tracing. So W3C trace information is also being added by application insights. And with that application map, we can put all of that together. So this is apparently just a small bit of it because it's not really complete. Let me see if I can do a bit more information because I'll give it some trial runs. So if you put more information there, you can see that after a while, after it collects all this information, you can really see what is going on here. And then you can see, well, a couple of things that go well. So we have here the front end calling the back end. The back end is using key vault. Over there, it's it's using SQL. You know, that's the Linux container for SQL. But you can see all the things that are happening and are flowing. So we could say, okay, well, what were the things that went wrong? So apparently there were some things we can investigate. There were failures. Give me some samples. Check out those things, and again we are seeing the end-to-end details, and this is where you can see, oh, okay, so there were 3 retries to, and this is our retry mechanism kicking in, but apparently this is, you know, not really going well. And you can see, well, okay, after some investigation and combining information, writing some smart queries, you might just find out, okay, so it's always limit is 0. And then you can go back again and say, okay, where did we have limit 0? And let's see what the traces were. So this is how you can really profile and analyze your application with all the information that is coming from it. All right. So we have this thing running. Let's do something else. So if we do docker ps, we can see what is running here. And in this leaderboard web API, we send out this other type of information. It's this thing here. So I'll just take the first 3 numbers. And now let's see if we can dive into that container. So we'll do docker exec. -w because we want to be in a subdirectory, this number, and then bash. But let's see. Let's see if what am I doing wrong? Sorry. Well, okay, we can try that, but I think it's something. No such file directory. Oh, no, let's do it the other way. Yes, okay. So ls, here we don't have the tools. Oh, I know what's happening. Just bear with me, because I need to stop this. And because it's all big, it doesn't really show things. I need to do a release build and run that, because what I did to show you in this Docker file, when setting up, I added this new things here. So it says install the tools for .NET Trace and .NET Counters. That's an additional thing, and I'm copying the tooling over because the final image that we're creating doesn't have the SDK, so we can't install it later on, but we will have the binaries and we can run that. So let's see if we are good to run. It's still doing these things. Now the .NET trace and .NET counters allow you to dive into the system diagnostics tracing, the new stuff with event source and the event counters and the event pipe. So that tooling can do that. And obviously now it's like taking a really long time to recreate stuff, but we're almost there. And we'll do it again. So we'll do a Docker PS. This thing has changed now, 762. So let's do 762. There we go. And now we can run this .NET counters PS, and we can see, okay, what are the things that are emitting this information that I can work with? And we see that this thing, it's usually 4.3 and .NET in a container, but it might just be any process ID. And then you can say something like .NET counters, I think it's monitor, and then we say, okay, minus, you can say the process ID 43, and we can do a dash counters, and I named the counters retro gaming API. Fingers crossed. So it's now, waiting for initial input. We could just do this and say, okay, we also want system runtime. And then we should see a little bit more. There we go. So this is already outputting information. This was happening for each and every .NET application, .NET 6 and onwards that you have been built. This was already there. So that's cool stuff happening inside. And then we'll just do a post. Try it out, and we'll do something like Alex 360 and do Space Invaders 2000. And we'll do this really big high score. Execute. So now I should be fast. Click it. Go here. And then it should pop up. Did you see it just a moment ago? Just watch this. It's quick because it's only a metric like a blink. So this is the thing that we got. So if we do a bigger one, and then it should light up, and then see it shows the value just for a second, and you can collect this, and then you can create graphs from it. But this will also end up in our application insights. So that's the last thing that I will try to find quickly. So we'll go to the app insights again, then go to metrics, and if all went well, we can see that this high score thing is here, and then we can see the high score values coming in, and they're changing around. But it's a little bit contrived, I know, but just imagine what it would be average sale sizes on your web shop, or the results of calculations and thin numbers that will tell you, are we doing okay, or how are things going? Items in a basket, a number of mortgages being closed. All right, so lots of good stuff. There's .NET Monitor that allows you to interactively work with it. There's even a web API, so you can do this remotely and inject that in containers as well to run as a sidecar, or you can use the tooling locally. And what I already showed you is if you want to close the loop, and instead of just a monitoring tool, use Azure Application Insights. That Application Insights is able to give you a complete picture of all the moving parts in your application. So from databases to the front end, to the APIs in the back end, and everything in between that's used. That's the benefit of, I think, using a Microsoft ecosystem. But again, you're free to substitute this for any other thing. And it's just push there, and you can work with the things. And I gave you a few little blimps of things you can do with an APM, an application performance monitoring tool. Yeah, so there's some information on how do you get this in as logs and traces, or with trace listeners, or with this telemetry. And then I also showed you how you can collect this with the same thing with the .NET Trace, the .NET Counters and App Insights, that it's all, it's all available, different tooling, different things, but it all comes together. And I think with this, you can build a really solid system that is observable, where you can see everything that is going on and not hear it from your customers or the people that work with these things that you build, but you can be proactive there because you can also do alerting based on those signals. And this is kind of the picture a bit larger, where you can see, okay, these are the things, and it allows you to choose what you want to investigate. All right, so one thing I didn't show you is about how do you do the alerts, but probably I have some alerts on my phone now because it does monitor, is there an absurd high score being registered? Because that's kind of weird, and it's based on the metric. So there you would have the full picture of everything that's going on in your system. So we made it observable, we had all the logs, traces, and metrics collected, and we can do automated traces and things. I know we're out of time, but just want to do one final check on the alerts. Did an alert fire? Well, they did. So it did say absurd high score. They were just fired. It was new, and it was this morning, I think. Is it? Yes. All right. With that, I will wrap up. If you have any questions, I'll be here, I think most of the day and at the after party. So do come up to me and talk about the things that you ran into or everything that you want to know on this or maybe other cloud things. If you want to reach out later, then this is my Twitter handle and my email address. And do let me know what you thought and what your plans are on how to use this. So thank you very much.
I think we have run out of time, unfortunately, but Alex is invited to pose the questions maybe during the sessions, between the sessions, or during the break.
Yeah, the coffee breaks are nice, so just
I think it'll be the best.
Come up to me and thanks. Have fun in the rest of the conference.
Okay, thank you very much.